Okay, so my name is Chris O'Dell, and I've got a talk here called You Build It, You Run It, because I'm trying to advocate for developers to take part of on-call and take more ownership of your code. So before we continue, though, some ideas, what I'll be talking about and what I won't be talking about. I think it's very important that you understand what I'm going to be covering and what not. So I see that developers being on call is an evolution of the software delivery pipeline. It's like the next stage. I'm then going to cover some tips about being on call, some ways of handling it if you are the person on call, and running an on-call rota. So kind of like the stuff afterwards. So if you've decided how to go about it. So it's around, it's if you make that decision, how to move on to it. And what I won't be talking about site reliability engineering. That's a particular different topic. So if you're here for SRE, that's not it. I'm not going to talk about things like chaos engineering to break stuff. I mean, that's a whole other topic as well. So if this is not for you, feel free to go. I don't mind. So this is me. I'm a senior technical consultant at Cantina, and I've been doing software dev for like 12 plus years. And I want to, and so you can get an idea, I've done about 3 years of unofficial on-call, where you're in a startup and pretty much everybody's on-call, and 3 years where I'm actually have PagerDuty and actual rota, actual kind of official on-call as a dev supporting my own applications. So I have done this stuff. I'm not just talking about this is brilliant. I've actually lived it. Ooh. Sidestep, written a little free O'Reilly book. If you guys want to grab that, there's a download link. The website is cdwithwindows.net. So just a little book there, and I'm working on the second one. Now again, this is just the tip of the iceberg. I just want to bring the concept, because I feel like the concept of devs being on call is quite different and new to a lot of people. The first time it comes across to them, it's kind of like they reject the idea initially. And I understand why. I mean, there's horrible stories and things like that. And I'm not going to cover everything. It's just an introduction. There's loads more to talk about. So I'll start with the CD pipeline. Like I say, I think it's an evolution thereof. So I'll cover that briefly. Okay. And most CD pipelines look very similar to this. You'll start with some kind of analysis step, possibly with QA, with BDD, whatever it works, you'll do some kind of planning. And then you get into the development TDD cycle, possibly pair programming, where you do the red-green refactor steps. This is all familiar, yeah? All nod your heads, yes. And you'll commit that to source control, which will then probably be picked up by your CI server, which will do the build and unit testing, some more feedback. You'll react to that feedback and update your codes. And then when that passes, you'll do another layer of testing, probably some acceptance testing, some automated testing, maybe even manual, whatever. And that goes back to the development cycle, more feedback. And eventually, you might do a final review before it gets deployed. It's pretty standard CD cycle. Is there anything missing on that diagram? There's a feedback loop missing right here. So you've got your feedback loops from every other step. And in most environments, you kind of stop here, you just deploy it, it's done. And in many places, that's not even done by the person who did the code. So that final feedback loop never reaches the people who are doing the work. There's also another step that was missing. That's actually running the code in production. Once you've written it, it's got to go out there and be in use. And obviously, that's missing a feedback loop too. In many cases, you don't know what happens when your code is out there and being used by a customer. You already moved on to the next piece of work. And that's usually due to the fact that there is a wall. In many, many places, there's a wall between dev and ops. I mean, you've got your devs over here who are incentivized to push code out, get more features done, do more changes. On the other side, you've got the ops guys going, please don't break anything. Leave it alone, it's working all right. Stop touching things. It's keep it running, keep it up, keep it stable, no risk. And those obviously push against each other. They push against this wall, and you end up losing the feedback loops that we would love to see off the end here. Okay. So yeah, the separation cuts off those feedback loops. The developers are blind and the ops are unable to influence. So, some quotes from Joey Parsons, Airbnb SRE manager, of this excellent document if you haven't read. Having a separate operations team creates a divide and simply doesn't scale. It puts the onus of responsibility for fixing an issue on the wrong team. Metrics, they're a good way of kind of making a hole in the wall, effectively. You can put some logging, some graphite, Grafana, graphics, metrics, and expose those back that way, and you can kind of make like a way of seeing what's happening this side. And a lot of places must have this in place right now. You've got your live logging, your live metrics. You can see that, you can get all the information. And that's born the metrics-driven development. And it's still, though, one step removed from actually seeing what's going on. That's telemetry. We call that one telemetry. And there's a really awesome talk here by Jordan Sissel. I will share all these slides so you can have a look at all these extra things. Because actually a lot of this is going to be other resources. Because like I said, tip of the iceberg, loads more stuff. I'm going to give you loads more resources to keep and have a look at. So telemetry, sending operational and business data from your applications, health monitoring, business metrics, aggregated logging, so that you don't log onto the box, because you probably can't. You've still got your ops wall, right? And that will give you enough of a bit of information. So yeah, Sam Newman, hero. Aggregated logging, get all your logs off the machines where they're generated and forward them to a central location for querying. This is not new. This has been out for a while now. Most people are on board with this, right? You all got aggregated logging. If not, please grab it, so otherwise you're blind again. Now, Elk is a popular aggregation tool, Stack even. Alternatives, if you want to just get started, are like SAS ones. So log entries, paper trail, those kind of things. Just get some information off your stuff. Yeah, Elk. Graphs, metrics, ways of seeing the other side of the wall. StatsD, Grafana. Again, you can get yourself some hosted versions. You don't need to rely on needing infrastructure locally. Yes, that gave rise to metrics-driven development. And to be specific, that's the use of real-time metrics to drive rapid, precise, and granular software iterations. So those are the key words. So real-time means the metrics must be viewable by developers and ops staff in close to real-time to provide an immediate view of the effect of software changes. Okay? So that feedback loop, keeping it short. Rapid, so that it's rapid, combined with rapid development, you can take those real-time metrics and they provide a powerful force for iterating your software changes. Precise, again, being able to make changes to a metric. A development team can focus on a particular metric for each software change. And granular, that the software, that each metric is obviously small enough for a particular change. Yeah, precise, granular, yeah, very similar. But it's all based on a mental model that you make of your system and the way it works. So you put the metrics in you think you know you want. You put in the logs you think you know you want. You've made a decision that this is how it works in production, so that's what I'm going to log. So there's a mental gap in even that, and that wall is still there. Again, a really awesome talk by Coda Hale, Metrics Everywhere, where he talks about that mental gap as well. So I say, like I said at the beginning, that Developers on Call is an evolution of that CD pipeline to metrics-driven development, so that you remove that gap completely. You see the effect of your application in production. You're the one who deals with the outcome of your changes. You are the one that actually gets that feedback loop. Shrink the gap, the mental model that you've put up there. After a point, software and performance bugs become more common than low-level infrastructure ones. When you've gotten through your initial stages of developing something, you're no longer, you've figured out which version of stuff you want to run, what dependencies you need, how big a box, what size like networking stuff you want. Even in the cloud as well, it's even more important. That after a while, the stuff that ops and sysadmins, people generally more experts in, is not normally where a lot of the problems are after you've stabilized that kind of stuff. It's usually in the apps. And that's where you end up with a bottleneck if you've got a great big kind of, you need to balance that out a bit, which is why I believe you need to kind of bring some more of that software dev skills over. Blake Scrivener from the Netflix SRE manager. When things are broken, we want people with the best context trying to fix those things. Again, this is related to the fact that the people on that side of the wall, getting the alerts, getting the issues, getting the logs and stuff, don't know what they are, what they were related for, what they were created for. So they'll be scrabbling around trying to do their best without the context of the stuff that was created. So to shorten that feedback, to shorten that time to fixing it, have the people who invented it, who created it. This is what I'm going to talk about, a different aspect of this, is I think it's related to ownership. I believe that it's very important that we own our products from the entire lifetime of it. Now, the entire lifetime of your product is from the moment you start coding it to the moment you delete it. And I see that as a prerequisite of the autonomy, mastery, purpose paradigm. You know, if you want to have some kind of ownership, want to feel like what you're creating is doing something, if you want to feel like you can, yeah, it starts with ownership. So if you own it, it means that you have greater freedom of choice of what you develop, because you're the one responsible for everything. Hurrah! What the hell is that slide for? Yeah, hurrah. But then with great power comes great responsibility, right? So if you own everything, you are responsible for everything, you are the person on call for your app, you can choose what you do it in. Node.js, whatever. You know, you do it in C#, .NET Core 2, yes, I'm the person on call, I can choose that. But be careful. Don't jump straight into using the latest cool tool. I mean, I feel like now that you've got this ownership of your application from creation to deletion, that you need to become experts in supporting that existing tool before you get a little bit carried away with that freedom that you can now do what you like with that, by become experts on supporting it as it is right now. So discover what features make supporting applications easier or tougher than they need to be. You can learn about what metrics and monitoring information you need before you start changing everything, to track down issues or what makes it easier or harder. You can use that information to make a list of requirements and expectations and any new technology choices. And you can ask yourself, if you really trust this new stuff that you're going to do or whatever you're going to change your application to or whatever development you're doing right now, whether this is going to wake you or your teammates up in the middle of the night so that you don't have any kind of unknown issues. I mean, what I'm trying to say in this section is that if you've decided to take on ownership of your app, it comes with that responsibility of being aware of any given impact of your choices. I mean, a lot of people they feel like they're being stopped, like prevented from making any big changes. You know, you itch, you want that latest thing, you want that latest tool, you've read about .NET Core 2, and it's going to be amazing, it's going to be brilliant. We're going to run on Linux, we're going to make our cloud-like stuff a lot faster, we're going to save money. But you don't even know how to support it is right now, right, in many places. So before you make any leaps, just kind of understand your current app, support your current app first. So yeah, I say that operating in production is an often neglected use case of a product. When you write your use cases, when you develop a product or whatever, you think of your customers or your consumers, you generally don't think of the person maintaining it. You generally don't think of the person who gets the cool alerts, the person that has to restart it in the morning or whatever it is that you've got. And I think we need to raise the developer or the supporter or the operator's person's profile as a customer of our apps. It's a very valid use case that we forget until it smacks us in the face and everything's down at 4 in the morning or whatever. Again, back to ownership. If you are on call for your own product, it's more about risk management than control. So there's a lot of, I've seen when people end up having this full ownership, they start thinking, great, I can change it, I can now own it, I can do whatever I've been prevented from doing. But you end up asking yourself, is this really worth doing? What is the risk of me doing this? You have to balance innovation with stability. And it's not a license to be reckless. You start feeling that pushback that the ops team were telling you from the beginning. You start feeling why it's like that, and you start understanding a bit about each other. Why it's a fantastic change in the way you work. So, some tips about being on call. Hopefully I've given you an idea by this point of why I think it's a good idea to be part of the on-call support of your application. So now I want to talk a bit about what to do to make that easier, to be part of that. So I say that on-call engineers are like the first aiders of software engineering. Now, most people have done some first aid training, right? You've done all that. You know what first aid is, where they turn up and paramedics, they arrive and they try to do whatever they can to get the person into a stable place. They don't actually perform the heart surgery that they need. They just get them just working again and leave the rest to other people, or to the morning, or to where they've got more time to think about it. So yeah, you've probably all been taught the ABCs, for software, for first aid. So you check that the airways are clear, that they're breathing, that circulation is running. Pretty standard kind of first aid stuff. And I wondered if I could make an equivalent for being on call. So I thought I'd give it a stab. So I've got the ABCs of being on call, right? So you've got A for assess, where you kind of triage the incoming alerts. I've got B for blast radius, what applications are failing, what is it affecting? And C for compensate, which is apply the mitigating actions. So this is my first aid for on-call. Probably needs a bit more work, but I thought we could try something. So what are some compensating actions, you're probably asking? Okay. So these would be things like turning off feature flags, applying some kind of graceful degradation, maybe redeploying a known good version, turn on some kind of load shedding. There are loads and loads and loads of ways that you can deal with compensating a failing system. And this amazing talk by Ines Sombra, Architectural Patterns of Resilient Distributed Systems, is brilliant. She speaks very fast, but it's very much worth watching. She talks about papers and ways of putting in things like bulkheads and all the effects that this is. You're probably thinking, I don't have these things in my app right now. And that's true, you don't. You've never considered them. That's that use case, that missing feedback loop that you never fed back into your own app before now. So you have to balance, again, with the ownership of your app, you have to balance the creating these compensating actions inside with your feature development, that kind of thing. Are these terms familiar to everyone? I'll give a graceful degradation, where you fall back to something that mimics what it does right now, but without the full functionality. That kind of thing. Brilliant. But like the paramedic, you don't do the heart surgery on the side of the road. You don't try to do the hot fix at 4 a.m, or where everyone else is trying to get it all running again. That is not the time to investigate and create the long-term fix. That's a very important thing to remember, and I realize in the moment it's really hard to remember that. But it's very key that in that point where you're rushing and there are lots of information going on, that you don't investigate the root cause right then. You do follow-ups the next day or the next reasonable time once you've got it working again, when you've got breathing space, when you know the patient is okay for the night. So you hold blameless post-mortems as soon after the event as possible. And by blameless, what we're trying to do is find reasons for things that happen without pointing fingers. I mean, everyone's probably heard about the Hawaii bomb notification that happened. Yeah, so to give you a bit of information if you haven't, it was on the news a couple of days ago. They have an alert system over there which would send a message to everyone's phone saying, basically, we're about to be bombed, you're all going to die. I don't know why, but yeah, it tells everyone and they can, I don't know. But it turns out that it was sent by mistake. And what they've learned since is that the system had a drop-down, which said test and real. Basically the guy just misclicked. A drop-down. Again, so I would in that one, a blameless post-mortem there would be like, I wouldn't particularly blame the person who misclicked, but whoever developed a UI that put the real button next, well, whoever, how it got so far that you ended up with a UI with these two buttons next to each other. I mean, that's like, there's a lot of stages that particular UI went through before the person clicked it. There are a lot of things that could be changed about the process to prevent that from happening again. Again, the mitigating fixes, the UI changes required, go to the top of the work stream. And what I suggest is knowledge sharing. You've learned something very important right then after an issue, after an outage, after something like that. And don't keep it to yourselves, don't keep it to your own team. Do some kind of show and tell to everyone outside of the team. There was one issue in a company I worked in where they did a show and tell about something, and they discovered that async didn't work quite the way they thought it worked. And that it meant that everyone else had to realize that they also had the same problem and made changes in their apps to prevent it happening to them too. So John Allspaw in the Web Operations book says, mean time to recovery is more important than mean time between failure. What this means is that recovery, getting everything working again, is the thing you need to focus on rather than keeping everything from falling over. I mean, if you have to choose, I mean, we generally have to choose, we've only got so many hours in a day. So focus on being able to return to a good state over ensuring you never go down. So I'm seeing a few nods there and everything. And that feels a little counterintuitive initially, but then when you think about it, a distributed system is complex. There are multiple and varied reasons for why a system can go down, and almost all of them are nothing in your control. So being able to return it to a working state is the thing that needs to be focused on. And that's where all those mitigating actions, those graceful degradations, the feature flagging, the reknown redeploys, that's where they come in. Focusing on developing that is where you end up needing to put your time. Yes, data loss, unfortunately, is the one of most types of Fs that are a little more difficult to be able to deal with. But yeah, so read the Web Operations book and the blog post as well. So those two. The ownership of runtime success belongs to the team. It's because you own everything. Everything is kind of the success is your own. There is no maintenance team in this ideal world. There is no you are the persons, you are the guys that need to ensure that this thing runs properly in production. And production failures go back to you in order to fix. But there's a whole range of skills, ops skills, that kind of stuff, that are still so necessary. I am not advocating for no ops, absolutely not. I'm advocating that we knowledge share and share some of this ownership. And this is why I believe it's very important that we collaborate with them. I mean, they're specialists in their area. We're specialists in our area. I'm mostly talking to devs again. And that we should work together, understand how things work in production. If you've never operated something in production before, I think it's very important that you shadow, you see how it is right now, and improve generally your knowledge overall about how highly available systems, so that you can feed all this back into your development. This is that thing where you learn about things from Inna Sombra's talk, for example, about how to put in these compensating actions. What makes good logging? What makes good metrics? You know, what kind of stuff can you do to make it easier to operate your apps? Oh yes, some postmortems. I will add a Hawaii one in when we have it. But for now, here's some postmortems from things that happened before. So in January 2017, does anyone remember when GitLab deleted their production database? Woo! They quite nicely and kindly put in their full post-mortem on the net. Do read it if you haven't. It's so honest, and there's a lot we can learn from it. I mean, I don't think people share their failures as much as they should. So do take this one down and do have a read. And they basically go through the chat logs. I mean, they are literally sharing everything. The chat logs from their Slack channel when it went down, like what was touched, what wasn't touched, and how they are preventing this from happening again. I mean, I think what it was, they had database names that were different by like 2 words or something. I mean, it was that ridiculous. They're never going to have that happen again. And obviously the one when S3 went down. Like, we lost S3. I mean, we're supposed to get like 99.999 whatever, and we lost it for like a day. They also wrote a full post-mortem about what happened there. Have a read on that one as well. So again, their mitigating actions, I think, is they run the shell command on the wrong box and they targeted the wrong services, and it shouldn't have been so simple to delete production. So their mitigating actions, I believe, were to have separate credentials, that kind of thing. The key part is to never, ever fail the same way twice if you can. I don't think either GitLab or Amazon are going to fail that way again. They're not going to delete their databases again. They've learned something from this piece of this failure. So that's where it gets a little bit tougher, where you have to prioritize the fixes of your instance over any backlog work. And sometimes you end up with that argument about why I should prioritize over this feature work or whatever. But again, it's so you don't fail the same way twice. That's the argument you have to have with anyone saying to you, feature work is more important. So you need to ensure that all of your lessons have been learnt and that you've probably got some testing on there to ensure that it doesn't go away as well. So by now, you're probably, if you're supporting your own stuff, you've written in loads of like mitigating, compensating things. You've got logs. You've got everything else. You're going to be moving faster. I reckon by now you'll be moving way, way faster. So now you need to build in some safety precautions. You need to build in some kind of providing a sense of safety, and allow for failure, and support for improvement, and create a culture where on-call is kind of normal, respected, and supported. One place I worked in, we even had the CTO on call, but he was like fourth line up. But it's that kind of thing where the whole company is aware that it's not a second-class thing to be on call. It's where you've got a kind of whole structure and process that if anything bad happens, your phone beeps. You've got all these colleagues that are prepared to jump in and work on it with you because you've agreed this safety net, effectively, to deal with any issues that happens. Yes. Do not expect engineers, this is like how you can do it wrong by like expecting engineers to sit and watch logs. And I've seen this happen. I have seen some, like one place I worked in where they got to a point where they were like, no, on-call means that you sit there and you watch the logs. That's not on-call. If you want it to be treated as a respected part of your job, you need to supply like the tooling that goes with this. So something like PagerDuty or OpsGenie. I've seen at one place where they had a spreadsheet of telephone numbers and they would just go from the top down until someone answered. This, right, is actually a stereogram, so it's a 3D magic eye picture. So I won't leave it up for very long. I'll give you the slides so you can try and figure it out later. But I can come and give you the answer later if you want. Point of that one is signal to noise. So your focus now changes to ensuring that the alerts are useful, actionable, and they're worth waking someone up for. And I'm stealing most of this information from the ops world, like I said right now. I am taking all their stuff. This is a well-known way of handling on-call and support, and I am learning from them too. So if an alert happens, it needs to be something that's worth waking someone up for and tells you what exactly is going on and possibly even includes what to do to remediate it. All in one kind of bam. The fire brigade have to respond to every call out, so we should too. Effectively treat each alert as almost like a fire alarm, right? I mean, otherwise you'll start ignoring alerts. You'll start getting alert fatigue, that kind of thing. Actively combat the alert fatigue. Would I like to know? Yes. So you need to regularly review that all your alerts are still useful. A colleague is working somewhere else now where she's taken on an application from another team, and apparently they have so many alerts, they've like turned warning level on, that no one looks at it anymore. At that point, if anything really happens, you won't even see it. It'll be in this swarm of information. So some tips now on how to run an on-call rota. Does anyone know what this actually is? I mean, it's from the past. It is an actual old school, old worldy time clock. So you used to have to kind of take a piece of card, slot it in the box, and that was like how you would say that you'd started work and finished work. So it was an actual rota system. Oh yeah, I've written here, this is where the talks get even more a bit listicle, I'm afraid. There's an amazing blog post here about running an on-call rota. See, that's from 2010. This is where we are learning just now. It's kind of like, as devs, about being on call. But this is from an ops guy who had loads of tips for other ops guys on how to run on call rotas. So we just take all that knowledge and learn from them. So yeah, no more than 1 week at a time. Now I've heard of hero people that are on call for months on end. That's not healthy for anybody. He suggests changeovers on Tuesdays, which seems a bit weird, but then you remember we have bank holidays in the UK. Try changing over when you're both on holiday. And have an agreed onboarding process for engineers, for new ones. So some kind of ability to shadow on call when you first start doing it. If someone new comes in, let them know that they'll be, this is the thing, if someone new comes in, you will have told them that on call is part of the job. Okay, so there should not be any surprises. But that they are shadowing. There's a process you've got where they spend like the first few weeks not actually the first one to respond, but they get the same alerts as the other person, and you both deal with it together until they're ready to move on and deal with whatever it is on their own. And escalation support, as I mentioned before, to support that person, so that when they do get their first real issue, they've got help. Agree a reasonable SLA for alert acknowledgement. There can be a misunderstanding of or an assumptions made on how quickly someone needs to come back to you when an alert's happened. There was, so do they have to acknowledge it within 5 minutes, 30 seconds? Is 20 minutes okay? I mean, it depends on your application. Some things have got more time that it doesn't matter if there's an issue than others. But it's the lack of agreement that can cause problems. So if you know, have whatever it is, agree what it is that works for you, and go from there. What have I written here? Yes, that was it. People aren't supposed to be chained to their desks. They're not supposed to be chained to their houses when they're on call. It's on call, not shift work. That's the key thing. If it's shift work, if you need 24/7, then that's not on call, that is. That's a different job completely. Probably SRE or something like that. And have the escalation policy that I mentioned to support it as well. Yes, build into the escalation policy the ability for people to jump if they don't respond, so that you've got the backup as well. And agree who's responsible for what, where the lines are drawn. So you own the app, right? But you still have stuff that the app runs on. So where's that line? I mean, it will be different for different things. If you're in the cloud, it's probably all the way down to the CloudFormation stack or whatever. But if you're in a hosted system, it's probably only as far as IIS or whatever. Anything below that is probably ops. I mean, wherever that line is, agree it. So again, it's the miscommunication that you want to avoid, so that when something happens, you know who should be picking up or helping with a particular thing. And that, again, prevents future issues. Here's the bits why most people don't want to do on-call. It is hard on a person. And burnout is a big thing in on-call, because again, you don't have if it's managed wrong, if they try to do the hero on-call or whatever, you can end up getting rather exhausted very, very quickly. John Willis, co-author of the DevOps Handbook, has a whole range of posts on how burnout is killing us. He is an ops guy, so he's been talking about this for a few years now to the ops community, but I want to bring it here to our dev community. He has this post where he talks about a friend who was doing a lot of on-call and only found out about his burnout and after a suicide. So very much so he is on a crusade to ensure that our industry starts taking this seriously. So yeah, be mindful of the cognitive weight of on-call. When you know that your phone could go off at any minute, that you could potentially be called in to deal with something, sleeping is not so easy. You can't go out, get drunk, because, if you're drunk, you can't respond. You can't just suddenly book a weekend away or whatever. You can't you have to have this thing in the back of your mind all the time that you are potentially going to get called away for something. So be aware that this does drain on people. So try to ensure that your team that owns your app and is on call is large enough to allow for things like rest, sickness, and holidays. Probably about probably about six to 8 people is what is recommended by the ops team, so that you're you're on call no more than once every 6 weeks, no sooner. And again, if someone takes a 2-week holiday, again that brings you down to 4 weeks, or if they get ill or whatever. And don't try to control it as well too toughly. Allow people to swap. Allow people to change their shifts. Say, on Friday I've got to take my kid out to football class or whatever, so that you can swap like Fridays with someone else. There is a tendency to go, right, we need to ensure that so allow freedom and ownership of people's on-calls. And we need to be able to give them the ability to improve their on-call process, to improve their experience of being on call. This is where the problem with getting your stuff prioritized could come in again. You need to, say if there is a flapping alert, or you constantly get something like every Tuesday at 11, there's this alert that always happens. There must be freedom, there must be power within the system for you to be able to fix that and prioritize these things for your own health. These are the ways, like I say, to prevent the burnout, is that people have the power to stop these things that annoy them and cause them to be drained. Money. The next question that always comes up is, how do we compensate people for being on call? And they should be compensated. No one should be expected to be working unsociable hours for nothing. Now, obviously, money is it's a little bit of a difficult subject, because I have heard of people that want to take extra on call because they're saving up for a holiday or whatever. I mean, it's they want the extra money, they want to be able to pay things off, they're looking forward to it, they get used to it. And another way is to use time in lieu, time off. The problem with time off and time in lieu is, can you actually take it? And it only compensates a little bit, because if you say get told you can have Friday off because you were on call on Thursday, what use is that if you've given half a day's notice and your family will work or whatever? Friday off is not a very great way to compensate you for losing Thursday. So yeah, money only goes so far. Time is not a great way to compensate. It works a little bit. And even so, regardless of all these things, you are still relying on people's goodwill, because in our industry you can just find another job. So you've got to be very mindful that whatever compensation we do only goes so far, and I don't have a good answer for it, which is why this carrot is so sad. You need to figure out a way that balances the requirements you have on people with the things that you need from your business and how much compensation they need. You have to have conversations and review it regularly. I don't have a good answer. Sad carrot, sad carrot. It's looking to me like devs being part of the on-call, being part of the support, is fast becoming an industry standard. I mean, all these companies have some sort of devs on-call right now. I've worked at Just Eat, and they have a proper full-on rota where you are within your first month, you're on call for your app, and they've got PagerDuty, and you switch between your team, and you are responsible for everything from the CloudFormation up, because they're in the cloud. I have friends that are working on Skyscanner, and they are just doing the same thing. And all of these people have got articles about how they do it too. So I think that now's the time we need to start taking pride in the stuff we're developing. Take pride in the things that you're creating. But without destroying your team, so there's a balancing act. So you need to own your apps, but do it with the knowledge that on-call and being supportive is very difficult. So if you're going to build this thing, I think you should run this thing. And that's the end of my talk, really. Thank you. Now, I have unfortunately finished, how much earlier? I do apologize for finishing really, really early. But I'm happy to take questions, and there usually are a lot of questions, so please feel free to ask a few things. Oh, by the way, does anyone want to have a look at the... where is it? Come on. Yeah. Whilst we ask questions. I didn't even know you could do text-based magic eyes. This is amazing. Whilst everyone tries to figure that out, is there any questions? I see your face there.
Would it be possible to go back to the slide of the links for
there are links all over the place. There are
yeah,
links all over the place.
Sorry, I thought you had a
No, that's
slide on the
that's
end.
the photos.
Oh,
that's the photos.
excellent.
But
Cheers.
I have these online as well, and I will send a link out. If you want, you can give me your email address afterwards.
Sorry,
and I
would
can...
you mind repeating the question just for the recording?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, the question was basically just this: if there was a slide with links at the end, could it be repeated, please? But there was not, so it was
There
a bit
is
moot,
not.
I'm afraid.
I have this on slide deck, and I've listed all the links there because, as I said at the beginning, this is more of a, here's more info, please go read it all. There are some excellent talks out there that dive into each aspect far more than I have. I've tried to put it all together into something you can action and start with, and hopefully convince you that it's worth getting those extra feedback loops and removing the kind of mental model that you think is working out so you kind of improve and own your own apps. Is there any other questions? Or have I bored everyone to death? Oh, great, so this is easy. You're all on call on your own apps, yeah? Yeah? What's stopping you? How about that? What is stopping you? Sorry? You do need everyone to agree, yeah, to think. No, you can't just have one or two, because then you end up in that burnout situation where they're the hero person who's on call.
Some people in the other department that are on call really have really get called out because they get paid. But they're the older people who can kind of fix it going forward and improve it.
I agree with you.
There's no incentive to fix it.
Okay, so this is where that carrot is sad again, that if people are using on-call and seeing it as no incentive because they're getting money every time they're called out, then again, yeah, the carrot is quite sad. So that balance of reward and ownership is kind of misbalanced there. And so there's probably a way you'd have to re-engineer that reward scheme to bring it back up, to balance it out. Yes?
So one of the things that, as a Microsoft studio, we are trying to build a game that millions of people will play, right? And in the best scenario, we will have millions of people playing, and our services will be running all the time, and it'll all be perfect. Mm-hmm. But there must be a point where having the devs being on call can't work anymore. When you're running the big services that you've got millions of players and you have an expectation for brand new features and the game has to continue moving forward while also maintaining stability, there must be a point where you have to be able to give that work over to not necessarily the developers who built the systems, but developers who understand how to maintain that system. So how do you, is that a thing that you've come across? Is there a point where it fails? And if there is a point where it has to transition, how do you get around that? That's
where I believe SRE came from. So that's where Google have kind of developed that role that's a kind of a crossover, but with a difference. So they are engineers that are doing the support, but it's definitely and completely for apps that have reached that stability point where they're no longer in a kind of experimental development phase. They're in this app is now just chugging along, and we've constrained it. We know exactly what is its domain, what issues it can have. And I think they have this massive process that enables you to promote an app to SRE stage. It has to go through a shed load of checks, a shed load of requirements before they'll take it on. So it has to be very stable. So for your case, that's perfect. I mean, you've reached a point where the app is ready to be passed over to some kind of SRE environment. So I'd look into that Google book for that.
Thank you.
Yeah, which is free, by the way. I don't know if you know that. Phil.
Two things. First of all, imagine if these were your logs.
Yay! Yay! Signal to noise.
And secondly, on the subject of burnout,
Yes.
have you heard anything about using heart rate variability as a measure of potential for burnout?
No, I do think I did see something in passing that there was a company doing that. They were tracking their engineers when they were on call in that way. You're going to tell me who it is, aren't you?
I mean, it's something that I use for a measure of stress in the body,
Okay.
either from physical endurance or from just stress through work. So it can be a very useful way of monitoring if you think you might be
Okay.
liable.
So that is if your company is at a point where they know that there's a potential, or for a self-measurement as a way to...
I'm thinking more on an individual basis, but
Yeah. Okay. No, I haven't, but it sounds like a good idea. I think, whether you get good sleep or whether your heart rate goes up, it's great being aware of whether you're beginning to have the early symptoms of burnout. Yeah, very good point. Is there any other questions? This is like the quietest I've had from people. Like usually people are like, no, this doesn't work. So there's a question right at the back.
Hi, I have a question about how you can advertise such change of thinking to the developers, how you can promote, how you can make them make this step.
Yeah, it's probably where I was talking about the leaning on the ownership part. What I believe a lot of developers want to do is that they do want to have pride in what they're developing. They do want to be able to say, I made something great today. I'm working on something awesome. And with the ability to do that, they need to be able to own the app, control the app, be in that position where they guide its creation. And so I think that working on the ownership angle and the pride angle is where I'd go with that. So if you want to make this awesome, if you want to change it, if you want to rewrite it into something like whatever's cool right now, you have to be responsible for it all the way. It's like a little bit of give and take. I mean, I suppose I'm not explaining it very well, but as an example, there was this app in a company I worked on which had been in the company since the beginning, and it was probably the worst app, and no one wanted to work on it. Like seriously, no one wanted to work on it. It was like, it served up media files, and it was horrible. There was one guy that ended up working on it, and he started slowly and gradually changing the way it worked, slowly adding more metrics, adding more monitoring, adding more logging. And that's where he started. He started with that. He didn't really start with rewriting or anything. He started by adding more information, so that when he started getting the alerts, or when the ops team at that point, there was no devs on call, got the alerts, they had more information on how to change it, how to work with it, what to change, where to look for issues. And before long, people found this really interesting, and other devs kind of joined him on that team, and were like, this is great, you're exposing all this kind of really useful information about which endpoints are the most used, which ones are crap, which endpoints we can delete, what code we no longer need anymore. And give it 6 months, he made the app that everyone wanted to work on by using this by turning it around and using this information, this monitoring, this metrics logging into an app that they were proud of, and everyone was like, whoa, I want to work on that app. And part of it was on call in the end, because what he wanted to do was be able to take that extra information that he was getting and make the app better.
Thanks for the answer.
Does that help? Yeah. I am going to need to add more slides. Hi.
Could you incentivize people on fixing the issues?
Could you incentivize people on having the issues fixed on the post-mortem and the recovery side of it, rather than on the call? So they're on call and they have to drive the fixing of the issue that caused them to be on call?
I've not tried that. I've absolutely not tried that. I'm not sure how you would track that either. I mean, I suppose it's very similar to kind of like bug bounties, that kind of thing, I suppose, in that way. It would have to need to be extra rather than compensation, because you've still lost whatever time you would have lost as part of on-call. Yeah, maybe you could try it.
Or if you start baking in a load of bugs just so you can fix them and get paid for it.
That's the thing. That's why, yeah. There's always ways. We're developers, right? Systems to us, stuff goes in, stuff goes out. If you want to come out, you put the right stuff in. So there's always a way. If money's what you want to come out, you'll put the right stuff in. So it's I think this is where I'm trying to say balance it out with kind of, you know, the ownership side of it, the building something awesome. Maybe, because money is still goodwill. It's still, you know, you're still riding on someone's goodwill to fix these bugs and not put in more bugs. So yeah, there needs to be a different compensation, different reason for people to be wanting to do this stuff. It goes so far. Okay, I'm not going to make you all go sit here for 10 minutes. I'm very, very sorry for finishing so early. But if you want to go, go ahead. And thank you so much.